Morning, everybody. A few bleary-looking eyes out there. I imagine there's still a few to come in. So, welcome back to BIGSOUND 2014. And this morning we're lucky enough to have Peter Noble with us. Unmistakable Peter Noble. He's been in the music industry 50 years, best known as the owner of Bluesfest Touring and Bluesfest, which of course is the longest running and most decorated major Australian music festival. Booked the likes of some absolute legends of the 20th century, Paul Simon, James Brown, Bob Dylan, B.B. King, R.E.M., Bonnie Raitt, just to name just a few. Now the festival has a major international reputation these days, as we know. It's won numerous Helpman Awards, which is the live performance industry awards, including just recently again another Best Contemporary Festival last month. Been nominated 4 times, I think, Peter, for the prestigious Global Polestar Award as Best Festival.
Yeah, 4. Yeah.
And multiple tourism awards, too many to count. So Peter Noble himself also won a major award last year, a Lifetime Achievement Award, the Rolling Stone Award. And he's one of the few, or I believe possibly the only Australian independent record label to have won a Grammy Award as well. So, and last year, I think the American legend Boz Scaggs said that Bluesfest, paid him the ultimate compliment by saying Bluesfest is up there with Glastonbury and the New Orleans Jazz Festival. So Peter and I are going to have a bit of a sort of fireside chat, really. I'm going to do my thing as a bit of a working journalist and take a few notes, and we're going to talk about past, present and future of Bluesfest and of Peter Noble himself, which should be fun. We'll see if we can get a bit of insight into the man, but to the festival and what's made it successful. So get comfortable and welcome Peter Noble.
Thank you. Hey, thank you for coming on Friday morning after 3 big nights, you know, like, I'm amazed there's basically anyone here. You guys must be have a very strong fortitude.
Peter,
thank you.
Peter, how do you feel, first of all, when you hear that sort of amazing list of achievements, that rap sheet?
Oh, I guess you think back to the first time you ever won anything, and it was such a big deal, you know, like that's about 10 years ago now. We won, I think, a Helpman for Australia's Best Contemporary Festival, and you go like, wait a minute, you know, like, it's taken me over 35 years in the business to win anything. And it wasn't for lack of trying or thinking that we had a chance, and we've won a few since then, and I would never like to think that I'm egotistical enough not to think that every single thing you win is very special, and that you've got other really great events that have also been nominated, and you know, like this year we won the Helpman, and we were up against Livid, and I really thought that they were going to win. I didn't think we were going to beat them, although they did win another major award at the Helpmans, and I'm just going like, we're not going to win. I mean, this is this amazing event at Sydney Opera House, and it lights up the whole of the area, and it's a great event. And so I guess to some degree, you look at that, and there's also a little bit of the, you know, somebody said to me once, look, you know, why do you do everything you do? You know, why are you still so passionate about it? And I guess there's a little bit of the fear of failing in it. I mean, you know, it's a great motivator. I don't always think that what we do is going to be necessarily turn the world on fire, and so I'm very driven by that thing of like loving what I do, but not always going like, yeah, I'm always being a little insecure about it, and I don't think that that's a bad thing.
So maybe let's go back. 50 years in the music industry is just remarkable. Let's look at some of where that came from. You started out as a musician, but I'm always curious to know, with people who've had a career in music, what's the first time you can really remember music really grabbing you and getting hold of you and not letting go?
Oh, you mean way back when I was like...
Way back.
Well, I guess like everybody, you hear the music that your mum and dad play, you know, back then it was, I remember 78s. You know, that was like, they preceded 45s. Anybody remembers 45s?
And any artists?
And the artists, you know, of course my mother and father in the in the 50s were playing the music of their time, and somebody once asked me what was the first blues record I ever heard, and I said, I'm pretty sure it was Bing Crosby singing Blues in the Night. You know, my mama done told me when I was in short pants. I remember that song, every word of it. I once told that to Corey Harris, and I think I watched his head spin. He's going like, that's not blues. But yes, it was blues. It was white guys singing the blues, just like John Mayall did. And Bing Crosby was a great singer, by the way. Not necessarily my favourite singer ever, but what really influenced me, luckily, when I was younger, was in the mid-50s. I had an older brother, and he was buying the hit records at the time. And so, you know, in my house, I'd be hearing Fats Domino and Little Richard and you know, great stuff like Huey Piano Smith and the Clowns. And I never knew that it was all being cut in the one studio in New Orleans. I never knew that at the time, Cosimo Matassa's studio. And it all had one band that played on it all. It was the band that was Fats Domino's band. I mean, even Little Richard didn't play the piano on his recordings because, I mean, in the day, back then, you couldn't multi-track. So, Herm Kovacs, he can probably tell you about that, got a studio, but so you had to cut it all, you know, live. And so Richard couldn't sing and play at the same time. You know, the incredible piano he used to play, so they'd get Huey Piano Smith in to do that. And he's the actual guy that plays the piano on Little Richard's records. But I didn't know any of this, you know, and I'm just going like, all this music I fell in love with came from New Orleans. And I still love the music of New Orleans. I just think it's so unique, so special, and you continue to see artists come from that part of the world and create something new and amazing. I mean, you've only got to see Trombone Shorty to go like, what's that about? I mean, he wins the award for the best jazz artist, and it's one of the hardest rockin' bands I've ever heard. You know, bounce music, Big Fredio, who's coming to play the Falls Festival. I mean, that's a new style of music coming out of New Orleans, as they continue to do.
So there's
nowhere else in the world like it.
We can see Peter's very enthusiastic this morning, which is fantastic. So, and I want it noted, we had Peter Noble singing already, and that's impressive at this time of the day. Now, you do have a voice, and you started out in a band that was quite successful, and you had a single, and you played the bass. Is that right? Tell us a little bit about.
Yeah, well, like most kids back in that time, you know, the Rolling Stones and the Beatles and all that British invasion came along, and so you just got with your mates and you all figured out, well, you be the bass player, you be the guitar, whatever, and you all formed you know, your neighbourhood band and rehearsed at the local scout hall or something like that, and out of that, well, I mean, it was a good way. You'd throw on a local dance at the scout hall. I guess we were all about 15 years old, 16, and you'd get the edge on the other guys of getting to know the girls. And that's what it was about. Come on, and luckily for me, I was in just a neighbourhood band, and we were looking for a front singer, and we advertised, and back then where I grew up in Croydon Park was along the railway line of Croydon and Burwood and all those areas, and the British migrants who come out at the time, the 10-pound Poms, would pretty much spread down from Villawood Hostel down the line, and you know, that's where the Easy Beats were living, and John English and lots of people, later AC/DC, and so we advertised for a singer. The guy shows up, we were all blown away by him, and we go, join our band please, and he goes, no, I don't want to join the band. And while I'm loading my bass amp into my car after the audition, he came up to me and said, well, I don't want to join your band, but I want you to join mine. And all of a sudden I'm playing in an all English or Scottish band fairly quickly. It was a pretty big thing to leave all my mates that I'd grown up with, but I must be honest, it didn't take me too long to make that decision, because these guys were amazing, and they were English. In the mid-60s, you ruled if you were English.
And did you mix much with the other people you mentioned, those contemporaries, the Young Brothers, the John Englishes, those other?
Did I hang out with them or something?
Yeah, did you hang out with them? Did you jam with them?
John English, yeah. No, not the Easy Beats at the time. I mean, they were God. They were like the biggest band in this country, and Little Stevie was just something. I mean, that was a band that could have easily been a success on a worldwide basis. I mean, Friday on My Mind was just this amazing song, and it did go top 10 or top 20 in England. They did have a go over there, and for whatever reasons, it didn't work out for them, but it should have. And I guess it was hard. If you lived in Australia, we used to have the Hoadleys Battle of the Bands, and the winner used to get put on a ship to England. I guess it was the return ship that brought all the 10-pound poms out, and you'd get to England, and then nothing had happened. There was no follow-on from that. We won a prize that, you were the best band in Australia. Well, let's put you on a boat for a month or 6 weeks or however long it is, go to England and then figure out what you're going to do. Well, so many bands broke up, it was incredible because there was no thought process, and the Easy Beats did that and at least created a bit of a bastion over there. Going back to Clapham Junction, no, we were a very popular band in that period of the 60s, and we could get 500 people, maybe 1,000 at shows. We would play with other bands like Mecca and great bands like that, and Velvet Underground.
Sounded a lot like
there's Australian Velvet Underground, a great band actually, Newcastle band.
Sorry to interrupt, Peter. The song sounded a lot like, one of the songs I heard sounded very Who-ish as well. It was very much like the Who.
Well, yeah, I mean, that single we had, they had the radio band back then where no American songs were going to be played on the radio until something got worked out, I guess, with APA at the time. So you were actually given American songs to record that would get, and you didn't get to choose to do your own music, which was quite a problem for us because we just thought that, we're very influenced by the Who and the bands like that, or James Brown and all the soul music stuff, and so it was just a real drag. We finally win this thing, win the record deal, and we get told what our single's got to be, and even though it was a top 20 or something like that.
The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Huh?
The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah, and luckily some people flipped it, and we'd written the flip side, and we got a bit of action out of that, but our band didn't last that long because the singer of the band decided to form a band called Sherbet, and so he moved on, and Sherbet pretty quickly moved on from him. And then he went on to be AC/DC's first manager, Dennis Lachlan, who one of our unsung heroes of the industry. But
so we'll move on to the States in a minute because you had your own little US invasion for a while there. But I wanted to ask you, from that time, from those early years, is there any lessons from childhood or all those early years that really stuck with you and serve you to this day?
Yeah, I'll tell you the one that got me. There used to be a club in Newcastle called Bus Stop. And for some reason, the band I was in was very popular in Newcastle. And one time we were up there, and there was a band, and we all used to stay in this grotty old unit with bunk beds, and you'd do like a 4 or 5 night stand. And we were up there playing with another band, and they were called the Valentines. And I couldn't believe, we were all about 18, and I said, how old are you guys? And they go like, 23, 24, 25. I go, and you're still in the music industry? I couldn't believe that there were guys like 5, 6, 7 years older than me, and I thought it was like we'd get a 2-year run and we'd be back to packing shelves or, getting the trade. And the singer out of that band was an amazing guy who I got to know a little bit at the time, called Bon Scott, and along with Vince Lovegrove, who recently died. And out of that time, I formed a bit of a friendship with Bon, or probably more to the point, anybody that knew Bon was a friend. That would be a better way to say it, because I've had times in the music industry, if I jumped ahead 10 years, where I was, not doing so well for a little while, and I was living in America, and I remember AC/DC did their first US tour, and if I can jump ahead for a minute?
Absolutely.
And I just called the hotel just to say, well, congratulations, Bon, I'm really glad to see that you're making it, and because he wasn't there, so I left a message. They were opening for Cheap Trick on their first US tour, and about 77 or 8. And it wasn't that long before I got a phone call back, and it said, message was, well, come on down to the box office. And I go, oh, good, he give me a free ticket. And I get down there, and the message was, come straight backstage. And I get back there, and I hadn't seen Bon in 6, 7 years. And it was like, mate, how are you? What are you doing? Yeah, you've got to check out my new band. We're doing good. And of course, they were doing great in the UK at the time, but they were just getting known in the US, where I was living. And after the show, Bon goes, well, come on, Peter, what are we doing? And we go out together, and it's like, I'm going, it's like your best mate, you know? But I got to tell you, it was the last time I ever saw Bon, and we actually went down to a punk club, and we got in a fight down there with the bouncers. And that was so Bon Scott. You know, the bouncers really gave him shit, and he was cool at first, and after a while he went like, enough, boom. And I go like, so the last time I ever saw Bon Scott, I went out with him and got in a fight, and I'll never forget it, and I tell you what, I miss that guy. When I was driving to the Mascot Airport to pick up a band a couple of years later, and it came over the radio that morning he died, and I just pulled over the side of the road and cried. He was special, you know, one of a kind, one of the greats of Australian music. You know, he's a Scotsman. Yeah.
You wanted rock and roll, you've got it. So you tried your luck in the US, but I understand what really led to you moving into booking bands was that you were fired from a band at one point. I've seen that written that you were fired. I'd like to know why. What did you do?
Well, I moved to the US in '74, and I just wanted to have a go and see how I'd go over there. And after a few years, I joined a band that was touring a lot in Canada, although they were out of Oakland, California, and basically they had 3 girl singers and a male lead singer who was the brother of one of the 3 girls, and I kind of hooked up with one of the girls, and after we broke up, I didn't really have a job in that band anymore. Wasn't a good choice on my part. And so they dropped me off in Portland, Oregon. They're like, well, see you later. We're going down to California. You're fired. And I had somebody there who allowed me to stay with them for a few nights and got a job, you know, working in a takeaway food store, cleaning up. And I was walking down the street and I saw this sign. It said American Entertainment. And I went, oh, well, I'll just go in and see what happens. And I just told the guy, look, I've just been fired from this band, but I've got all these contacts across Canada and the Midwest of the US where I've been touring and with the band, and I know a lot of venues, and I reckon I'll be the best agent you ever got. I was starving, you know, I had to give him something, and I said, so if you'll give me somewhere to stay and breakfast, I'll work for you for commission. And God bless him, the guy said yes. So I had to make money to live, but at least he bought me breakfast, which got me through the day, and bought me a cockroach-infested room, which I could have somewhere to sleep in. And it was only a matter of weeks before a guy called me, who was an agent in Canada, in Victoria, and said, well, I got a couple of acts coming down through Portland, and I don't have a show, and if you'll pay me $500, you can have them. And I taught the guy into putting on 2 jazz guitarists at the time called Herb Ellis and Barney Kessel, the guy that owned the agency. And we took about $3.5 grand, so I became instant promoter. And that's kind of what happened. And so that's how I got into the agency side, but even more quickly into the promoting side, the late 70s. And I think my 2nd or 3rd show was B.B. King. It just went bang, you know, and these guys backed me financially. And then I had a club I was booking there called The Earth, and one night we'd have someone like the Television or the Ramones, with the Police, and they were getting $500 a show. All those acts were getting that sort of money back then. Dave Edmunds' Rockpile, but then the next night we might have Sun Ra and the orchestra, or John Fahey. It was just one of those clubs that booked everything, or allowed me to book everything. I had people there like John Lee Hooker, and so it was just an amazing time of learning about music and how to promote and how to find contacts in an industry, which I was able to do because I was house booking a room. And yet I was also doing concerts with artists, and after a couple of years of that I came back here. Give it a go.
I wanted to ask you, I heard you mention the Police. I wondered, did you notice any of the tensions in the band at that time, before they became absolutely huge? But
no, I didn't notice any. I would say, though, that what I do remember, I remember Television showing up, and they all played on acid, and it was a pretty interesting show, because they tried to do Marquee Moon, and I think They didn't quite achieve that on the night. I remember bands like, they were just great. Oh, the Ramones was another one. I remember, being backstage and the band basically having a fight over who could go out at the end of the show and go to parties, and other members of the band believing they should go to bed. It was quite interesting to see them have a spat. But God, they were good live. I mean, they were just monsters. You might get a 45-minute to a 55-minute show, but it was like 1, 2, 3, 4, bang.
There's a lot of sorry, Peter, there's a lot of rock and roll you're talking about there. What made you fall in love with the blues or come back to the blues at that time?
Well, I was always in love with the blues, but I've never gone like, that's the only thing that exists. I love blues music, but I pretty much like all music, and I find maybe for me that's been the best thing that's happened, is that I still think I can book contemporary music and I still get into it. Certain of the older promoters nowadays will say to me, oh, look, I've just got to have young people around me because I just don't understand the music that's going on. And I do that too, by the way. I've got some great people in Bluesfest who've got great ears. But I think that's one of the greatest gifts you get, is if you try to book contemporary music and stay in it, you're looking at some old guy like me and I'm still, announcing bands like the Black Keys and Alabama Shakes for tours, and Mariachi El Bronx, which I think a few people like. And because I get off on it, it's that simple. I love it. And blues is a very big part of that, but it's not the only part.
So let's fast forward to when you came back to Australia. Was that at late 70s, early 80s? Where did you go first, and how did you end up in Byron?
I came back to Australia at the end of the 70s for a holiday, and somebody happened to be down at a club called The Basement, and they said to the owner at the time, Chris Richards and Bruce Viles, oh, look, a friend of mine is here, and they're just here for a short time back in Australia, but they've been booking all this jazz, and I was doing a lot of that, and they just know how to get all these jazz acts, and they said, well, get the guy to come down. So I went down and I told them my story, and again they bankrolled me. They put up the money for the first tours I did, and I brought out people like Charlie Bird and Earl Father Hines, and again Herb Ellis, Barney Kessel, just on, Jimmy Witherspoon, and on you go. And so if it wasn't for those guys at The Basement, I would have gone back to the US. And I really thank them for that. I always thank them for that. I think The Basement has been one of the great Australian nightclubs and has done so much for our industry. It's kind of like, without it, if we ever allowed that club to close, we lose our history. That shouldn't happen. And I hope that never does happen. Even though Chris is not there anymore, which I still think he's the best band booker I've ever met in my life. But, yeah.
It is a special place, isn't it? It has almost a sort
It's got history dripping off the walls.
Almost a sort of spiritual feeling in a musical sense. And I was going to ask you about spirituality, because there's a side of Peter Noble that people might not know about, a little bit of spirituality in your life, and you've toyed with a couple of different religions at times, haven't you?
I do what?
You've toyed with a couple of different religions at times.
Oh, well, look, I'm like most kids. You grow up a Catholic, and I think by about the age of 7, I'd get up very early on a Sunday and head for the park. So Mum and Dad couldn't find me and take me to church, but... So I stopped being religious very young. Having said that, I found in my 30s that I wanted to become someone that, had something that I believed in, and I became a member of a Pentecostal church and got very deeply involved in that, Assembly of God church. And, the Holy Rollers, we all speak in tongues. But anyway, I found it in that I used to witness to people. I was a promoter, but I'd also go down King's Cross with other people, and we'd witness to people about why they should be born again. And in doing that, I studied other religions, because somebody might go, well, I follow Islam, and I don't see why I would want to become a Christian. And you go, well... So in doing that, I studied other religions, and I studied the Buddhist religion, if you want to call it a religion. And it just reverberated with me. I found it had made a lot of sense, and it's not really a religion; it's more of a way of life, as I look at it. So I guess I became a Buddhist somewhere in my 30s, and but if I wasn't a holy roller, I never would have been a Buddhist, and which is kind of crazy. And I still take a lot of pleasure in going to places where Buddhism is followed, like Theravada Buddhism in Bhutan. I was there for a little while last year, and I just found it so amazing to go into temples that are still alive and they're still being utilized, and yet they were built, you know, in the 9th or 10th century. And I did the same again this year. I went with my beautiful Annika, my lady, to Myanmar, and we went to BIGSOUND. And I mean, there's 700 odd temples there, and all the main ones are still alive. They're still Buddhist temples. They were built 1,000 years ago or 800 years ago, but they're still being utilized. And it's so good to see these things that are not museum pieces. You know, you go there as a tourist and you see them still being used. And I just find that I won't harp on, but I've just found that the story of Buddha and Buddhism, it really works for me. And I'm very proud to say that without trying to shove it down anyone's throat.
So let's move on to Bluesfest, which has really become the kind of the driving passion in your life. And you've been there from the very early days, although you didn't set it up. You did split with your co-founder, Kevin Oxford. Is there anything you can say about that?
Well, there's things I can't say legally. I think it's pretty well known that Kevin and I had a very colourful relationship. We lasted for a bit over 10 years together. I'd kind of go, well, there was a side of Kevin that I really liked, and still would like to say I like, and there was also a twin that I didn't like so much that you never know who'd show up. But Kevin and I had a bad fallout in the end. Let's just say that it became very physical. I spent time in hospital, and I wasn't willing to be a battered festival director. So it was one or the other, and I prevailed.
And he now runs a cafe or restaurant in Mullumbimby, I believe.
And it's a sad thing because, I mean, he was the first guy with Bluesfest, and he brought me in after 3 or 4 years because of just what I did in the industry, and all I really want to say about that is that your anger can be a very destructive force, and it can take away from you the things you love the most. I don't know whether he lives in regret over that or not, but I will say this, that anyone who's got anger needs to really work on it, because it's a very negative force in life. It takes away from you what you really want. Marriages, businesses, you name it.
And when's the last time you spoke?
10 years ago. I saw him somewhere and walked up to speak with him, but he didn't decide he wanted to speak with me.
At some point you made the decision, and from there a consortium bought out Kevin, I believe, and then at some point you made the decision to buy out that consortium and at Bluesfest.
Yeah, Chuggy, Michael Chugg bought in, and Glenn Wheatley and another person, Darryl Herbert, and
what made you make the decision to go
buy
alone?
them out? Well, I think that they kind of wanted to franchise Bluesfest. We created the West Coast Blues and Roots Festival, the Point Nepean Festival down the Mornington Peninsula, another one in the Botanical Gardens in Hobart. We did one at Whitianga in New Zealand. And I kind of felt, I went along with it, but I kind of felt we were diluting the event, you know, like on a Saturday night, all of a sudden Bluesfest didn't have the strongest talent because they were playing at Mornington Peninsula or somewhere like that, and I'm going, it's not really what I want to do.
You're much more a fan of the sort of the festival on site that goes for a few days than the touring one-day event, aren't you?
Yeah, I think it's a big. You know, you're really tempted when you have something that's kind of succeeding to make it grow and succeed in other places. But in doing that, it's like a lot of businesses, you know, they push out all these other offices, and they find in doing that they go broke. You know, you try to expand too quickly, and I was kind of going, well, we weren't really losing tons of money, but I think we were losing quality of the event, and I just went, well, I don't want to do this anymore. And I think it's true that, you know, Michael Chugg and I go back a long, long way. We still do tours together. We add artists to Australia. We did Robert Plant recently. We do acts like John Fogerty and acts like that. We co-promote. Now we're working with the Alabama Shakes, but who will tour again and do a proper tour soon, apart from the dates they're doing at Bluesfest. But as a partner, Chuggy and I were like two big fish in a small bucket, you know, always bumping heads. And now that we're not partners, we're best friends again. I actually go, Michael Chugg is one of my best friends, and I love the guy. He's got heart. There's no one in Australia, music industry, like him. He cares, and he cares so deeply about Australian music. But as partners, no.
So it's a bit like an old married couple sleeping in separate rooms.
Well, but we never get too comfortable with each other.
Now, I want to talk about the way you changed Bluesfest, because it began, you know, as a blues and roots festival, which we've talked about a little bit. But one really interesting thing you've done is brought in all these really different styles of music that in no way can be described as blues. This lineup, we've got Band of Skulls already, or a fantastic band, by the way. And I think fans of that band will be excited to see that. Wilco a couple of years ago, REM in the past, Sinead O'Connor, David Gray, Fat Freddy's Drop. I suppose why have you made that decision to broaden it so much?
It goes back, can you hear me okay? It goes back a long way. When I first got involved for the first Bluesfest I was in on, which was 94, the 94 Bluesfest, it was pretty much a blues festival. And I was walking around going, well, I'm pretty much the best known blues promoter in the country. And I'd also tour bands like Johnny Thunders and The Sweet and The Residents, and I wasn't just doing blues. However, I walked around, I looked at it and I went, you know, I know how many people show up at blues shows around the country, and I mean, apart from the fact that back then the biker groups had some very strong shows that we'd play with Canned Heat and Steve Marriott and people like that, there wasn't an awful lot of festivals, and not that many people go to see a band like a John Mayall or you know, maybe 500, 600, 700 people, but it didn't, like you look at a festival and you go, well, you know, back then we're getting 4,000 people a day maybe, and I'm going, well, how will we ever get to 6,000 or 7,000? It's not going to be through doing a strict blues festival. You can have a blues component, but it's time to start thinking about what else fits and sits with it. And an alternate country was just an obvious choice, which led to then going a couple of years later, well, there's this guy called Ben Harper who's coming up. I think his album back then might have been Fight for Your Mind. Somebody might want to correct me. But, and he's doing something that's a bit different. Like you could hear that he's heard blues, but he's been listening to Bob Marley and he's been listening to Marvin Gaye too. And we put him on in '96, and it was like this epiphany. The audience changed. It wasn't all guys who were stretching black T-shirts with Jack Daniels on the front anymore. It was much younger. They were right into him. They knew what was going on. And I was standing at the side of the stage going, I don't know what's going on, but I better find out quick. Because Ben Harper changed the face of Bluesfest, and within a year or two, he changed the face of Australian music. You know, all of a sudden, there's all these other artists that were influenced by him. And I mean, the obvious ones are like John Butler and people like that. And he just showed us a new direction, and we widened out the event greatly from that year of '96. I mean, you've only got to look back in the archives, and you look where we went in 4 or 5 years from that. We just said, well, okay, if it's great music, let's do it. But still have blues. But
so talking about great music, you've broadened it out so much. I wondered why you don't, and I'm not being facetious, why you haven't experimented a little bit with EDM. Now, I know it's a blues festival, but there are plenty of EDM artists who have a little soul or a little blues in what they do. We talked about that, didn't we?
We did, and I don't hear the soul in it. You know, it's kind of that simple. I mean, it's not music made by human beings, you know, through their emotions, through their hearts and through their hands, through their ability to play or to create something that really says something that moves you. I don't hear that. I hear EDM personally in this digital sort of blocks, you know. I don't hear it as music. Now, that doesn't mean another person doesn't have every right to hear it as music. It just doesn't affect me, you know. It doesn't get me. It doesn't sound human to me. But I can't deny its success, and it's. But just, yeah, it's just not something that I remember sitting around with the guy that runs the Montreal Jazz Festival about 10 years ago, and we talked about how do you make long-term events be relevant to the audience? And his whole thing was going into, at the time it was called techno, and I guess EDM is a more recent description, and how he took the Montreal Jazz Festival into the future by adding techno to it. And I go, well, that's an amazing, like you'd think from jazz and techno are almost like polar opposites. However, he succeeded in doing that. So I'm not kind of saying it's not something that doesn't work, and for some people it's the right thing to do, but for me at least, I don't see that as part of Bluesfest. I think we've got plenty of other forms of music we can add before we get to that one.
We better crack on. We're so many great stories. I never thought 50 years would take so long to talk about. Now, in over 25 years of Bluesfest, there must be some incredible stories, there must be some great stories. I wondered, who are some of the artists you've had to work hardest to get? Who's really made you work? And I suppose I'm thinking of Robert
well, there's
Plant,
still some we work hard to get. I mean, I invite Neil Young every single year. And we do take a viewpoint at Bluesfest, and I think the staff members can back me up, that there'll be certain artists we will make an offer on year in, year out, and we'll offer to tour them, or for somebody else to tour them, or to co-promote it. And sometimes it's not the right year. I mean, somebody might, for whatever reasons, want to take a year off for family reasons, or they just don't feel that they want to go this far at that time. But 2 or 3 years, or after knocking on the door through their management, you can bring people around. I mean, Robert Plant is probably the best example of that. I think we worked on him for 6 or 8 years and finally said yes 2 years back. And it was certainly something I think was part of their timing as well, because Led Zeppelin did that reunion show, where was that, in London about late 2012, wasn't it? And then everybody thought Led Zeppelin was going to go out and do a tour, and then Robert Plant turns around with the sensational Space Shifters and starts touring them about February, March 2013. And apart from a few English shows, we got the first shows.
And Plant gave you a bit of insight, didn't he, as to whether Led Zepp, we might see Plant and Page again, or...
Well, we talked about this yesterday, and I presented Robert Plant up in a Singapore festival that I've been doing, and you give these guys space. I mean, you don't, you know, as a festival director, you don't go up and knock on every artist's dressing room door and go, "Hi, I'm the festival director." You know what I mean? It's like, I don't think that festival directors or promoters are mainly dealing with management, agents. These are our contemporaries. The artist may or may not want to even meet you. I tour plenty of people I never even meet. And with Robert Plant, I was giving him some space backstage and not going near where he was, and he just walked up to me and said, "Gee, I hear you like the blues." And I went, "Yeah, I do." And we just had this whole rave about blues music, and then he told me a story. There was a guy that used to be a roadie for a band called Mecca, and he went on to be Led Zeppelin's main roadie. I'm sorry, I can't recollect his name. Clyde Colson. That's good on you. Thank you, mate. And he died recently, unfortunately. And that's what Robert was talking about, that this guy was like, you know, the roadie extraordinaire, and how on their first major Led Zeppelin show, they ran out of petrol in the van a mile short of the Roundhouse. And so for their first major show, they had to push the van for a mile to play it, and have Clive or Clyde? Clive. Thank you. And then he said to me, you know, like he died, but his family, his Kiwi, wife was living over in Raglan, and how after the tour he was going to go over to Raglan and hang out with her. And I'm going, this is a really nice guy I'm talking to. And you don't go like, that's Robert Plant from Led Zeppelin.
And you told me he suffered from nerves for pre-gig, and at one point at Bluesfest he felt a little unwell before he went on stage.
Well, when he came down to play Bluesfest, we had an amazing Saturday night bill. We had Robert on one stage and Iggy Pop on the other, and everybody knows with Iggy Pop it could be the last chance you ever get to see him, for lots of reasons, and but I happened to just be in the backstage area, and again Robert walks up and he goes, "Peter, I don't feel well," and it's about 20 minutes before the show, and I'm like, "What?" You know? And he goes, "Yeah, I want to throw up," and I go, "Okay, where's your tour manager?" Because, you know, you don't want to be in this situation. You know what I mean? It's like you pay someone to handle this. And he goes, "Oh, he's up on stage," you know. And I go, "Okay, how about this? We have basic sight vans that are toilets, you know, and backstage." And I said, "Look, I'll block the door to the sight van. You go in the toilet, stick your fingers down your throat, you'll feel better, and do the show." I mean, you can get up there, will you? And he goes, "I can't do it." And I'm like, oh. Here I am stuck with Robert Plant, who's got butterflies before he gets up on stage at Bluesfest and wants to throw up before he goes up on stage. And I guess, like you said yesterday, I wasn't going to tell that story. And you said, well, tell it, because it shows that he cares. You know, artists that get butterflies, that want to throw up before they get up on stage, do great shows. You know, that means that much to them. And it doesn't matter how many shows you've ever done in your life, the fact that every show is like that, you know what I mean? The tension and the thing of getting up there and doing it. And Robert did a great show. He certainly did, and I don't know when he doesn't do a great show.
Makes him more human, doesn't it? A sampler doesn't show up.
And he didn't throw up, by the way.
A sampler doesn't throw up before it goes on at a techno festival, does it?
Oh, that story, yeah. Well, there's usually a fire bucket at the side of the stages, and they do get used for other purposes at festivals because people get butterflies. They get physically ill, and not everybody. Every now and again it happens, and you know it's a big thing to walk up in front of 8,000 or 10,000 people and do a show and grab them. You know, I'm sitting here in front of people and going like, gee, I can do that in front of 100 people, but if you were 8,000 or 10,000 people, or 2,000 people, I'd go, how do I, you know, there's a lot of...
I wonder if there might be a sideline in Bluesfest headliners, you know, you could buy a bit of their puke or something.
Well, we sell the bucket afterwards.
Look, so over 25...
But I just say that about Robert Plant. In my experience with him, a gentleman, a nice guy, very, very personable, someone that you kind of go like, did you sing in Led Zeppelin? Were you the great god of metal, you know? He's not the guy you meet, he's the nicest guy in the world. I'd love to be able to say that about someone.
So Peter, over 25 years, you've brought a lot of amazing people out here. Who's the greatest artist you think you've brought out here?
Oh.
I'm going to put you on the spot just a little.
You know, it's like saying, who's the greatest artist you've ever seen in concert or something like that, I mean.
You can answer that one too.
You're going to ask me that one too. But yeah, certainly Ben Harper is a great part of Bluesfest. I think James Brown was a very, very, very important part of Bluesfest, and I was very proud. I got one of my children here today. I was very proud to be able to have them at the side of stage to watch James Brown play, because James Brown, to me, and there's a new movie coming out which I can't wait to see about him, but I put him up there with the greatest of the greats, you know. To me, James Brown is equal to the Beatles. You know, he created a style of music that, along with maybe a couple other people, funk music, along with, like, say, George Clinton and Sly Stone, that still is just so relevant. I mean, you wouldn't have hip-hop without it. You wouldn't have. I mean, to me, you know, James did a great show at Bluesfest. I remember seeing him play at the Apollo in the 80s, and he didn't do a great show there, and it was just something that I'd gone all the way to New York, you know, gone down to Harlem. Here's James Brown playing, greatest day of my life. Going to see James Brown at the Apollo, and he was on stage about half the time. He was having certain addiction problems, I believe, at the time. They certainly weren't happening in his latter career. He did have an incident with a woman just prior to that tour who he was married to, and he'd been arrested for assault. You might all remember that picture of James looking very haggard in the shot taken at the police station. So I had to tour him right on that, you know, within 2 or 3 months. And New Zealand didn't want to let him in the country. We had to go down and meet with the ministers in Wellington to get James in. Australia was a lot easier. And he bought, and I remember I was presenting him on tour, and I remember being in Auckland on that first show. And we're in the hotel, and you've got like a 20, 25 person entourage, band and people. And I'm going, I'm not seeing any of them, like for 2 days. And finally, I had to find out. So I got the tour manager, I go like, where's the band? And he goes, well, James has instructed that none of them can leave the room. They have to get room service. So that nothing can happen. Like, you can't even leave your room, you know, you can't go out to eat breakfast. So that this very negative media that he'd had for assaulting his wife, there was a whole lot of people who were looking for, you know, anything that was James Brown to add to that, and it would have been worldwide news. But I've never had a band where I never saw anybody till they walked on stage. It was just amazing. And I'm making no judgment call on what occurred with his wife, whatever happened. I don't believe anyone's got a right to hit a woman, but it was certainly something that was an interesting way to be touring an artist when the media was looking for something to get him on badly.
Great challenge, I imagine, at that time. Let's move forward to 2015. You've got a fantastic first announcement already that personally made me pretty excited. I love a lot of those names. I'd love to get a little bit of an insight into the nitty-gritty of running Bluesfest. How do you build a bill? Where do you start, and do you take risks?
Well, I notice there's a few Bluesfest people here. As you all know, it never ends. By the time we do a festival, it probably takes you 6 or 10, 12 weeks to really, you know, like put it all to bed. In a perfect world, I mean, it can take even longer than that. You know, we've got something like 1,200 staff to pay. You've got to go through every bit of timesheets and check it all and double check it all, and so by the time we kind of get it to bed, you know, I've got to be over here booking the next one. But having said that, there's always artists that you're booking 2 years ahead. You've got to be into the next one immediately and rolling in and probably getting a couple of weeks off at best. And I'm very much a believer that we need to get out there with an announcement around the first week of September. I think you could probably say that less people are going to festivals now than there were like 5, 6, 7 years ago when it was really at a peak. There's less festivals now for obvious reasons. People are not going out quite as much, and I think too many festivals were paying a lot of money for artists that their profit margins were so tight that one little error, you know, put you out of the business. And so we need to get out there with our first announcement at about the same time, even though we're the last festival of the summer, at the time all the other summer festivals announced, like Falls and Soundwave and all that, because I think a lot of people out there, you know, you can always try the experiment. I mean, how many festivals did you go to in the last 12 months? Okay, let's do it real quick, yeah? Who went to 3 festivals, like multi-day festivals, or the big ones like Big Day Out, in the last 12 months? Put your hand up, 3 or more. 3. Did you pay? Were you on the guest list? Come on, who paid to go? 3 or more. 2. Who paid to go to 2? Who paid to go to 1? There you go. I think that's kind of the answer. Like, that's about half the people out there. And people go to about 1 event a year, and you've got to get out there early so that one event, if somebody chooses to go to the Falls Festival, I might announce Bluesfest, and they go, gee, I would have gone to that. but I already bought my ticket to the other event. So we need to get out early, and we need to get out strong. And our first announcement is usually pretty contemporary, because most Australian festivals are contemporary. And we'll announce the heritage part of it and the blues part of it and all that. That will come. But I wanted to get out with a strong announcement. I wanted to get out with one that I believe resonated with music-loving community as well as media. And it's always, you know, you put it out there and you never truly know. I mean, you sit back and you wait for the response, and it feels like it's been a good response. And you don't know in your ticket sales. It takes a few weeks, you know, to sort of see how it tracked.
Peter, I wanted to ask you a question on behalf of a manager that I spoke to on the plane, actually, which is you're in the process of buying your talent in at the moment and talking to your suppliers. Any advice to people negotiating with you, and how would you negotiate with yourself?
Well, I'd find, firstly, I'd have the right artist at the right point in their career that was suitable. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense to be approaching off-cycle on a record, you know? It doesn't make a lot of sense if you're just if you're just taking that, you know, scattergun approach of I'll approach every festival and see which one says yes. I mean, if your artist is the right artist, you should be really focusing to play on the right festivals for you, not just any event. And if you're not getting it through me, there's plenty of other people in the company that you can pitch to, who might go, you know what, I really want this to happen. And there comes a time with Australian talent, after we booked the headliners and got them out and announced, where we all sit down and go through that rather deeply, and we get 1,000, 1,200 applications through our website to play, on top of management and agents offering us hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other artists. And so what we've got to do is try to get an approach where we're looking at artists who are coming to us. It's very difficult to sit down and go through 1,200 artists. I don't do it, but I do have people in the company who do it, does it? And we do find a few.
We better crack on because we're actually over time now, but I want to try to take some questions from the audience. But just beforehand, let's talk about a couple of quick things. Expansion, will you do it? And will you hand over Bluesfest at some point to somebody else?
That's funny you say that. I got a doctor's checkup this week, and my doctor was saying, you know what? People who are aged 60 to 65, 50% of them are going to live to 90 or more nowadays. So you've got to think about how you're going to be able to do that. You know, like, sure, we might lose a bit of energy by a certain time, but you've also got to be able to figure out how you're going to finance it. Will I step aside? Okay. I certainly do have approaches from 4 or 5 other businesses who'd like to look at buying Bluesfest. So the options are there. For me, the passion of doing it is still there, and I'm not necessarily thinking of stepping aside in the next few years. But time catches up with all of us, you know, and that's just the way it is. And I need to be able to think also about how to move the company into the time when I won't be there. And whether that's as a family event, and when I say won't be there, I might be in retirement, or I might have, you know, reincarnated.
Have we got any questions from the floor? Would anybody like to ask Peter a question about Bluesfest or anything else?
So I'll be there for a while,
well,
God willing.
Well, I've got one, funnily enough. A lot of festivals in the course of modernising have done some pretty radical things that really shake things up, you know, so they're really changing their model. So, for instance, we've got a lot of festivals split over 2 weekends and taking a week break. Would you ever do anything like that? Would you give away the naming rights to Bluesfest? Would we ever see Gibson Guitars Bluesfest or Yalumba Bluesfest? Or
will I give away naming rights?
Naming rights to the event.
Would I have a sponsor come in and buy naming? Sure.
Yes.
So absolutely.
Is anybody here from one of the major banks? Welcome to.
If somebody wants to, look, we're always looking for the right sponsors, and we're a little bit picky about it. I mean, for argument's sake, we won't take an energy drink. I've always thought Bluesfest has got a bit of an ethos, you know, and I'm not going to go and, you know, take Matasgo or someone. Okay, coal seam gas companies. You know, but if Telstra came to us and wanted to put some money into our event that allows us to do our event better, why would I say no? I mean, that doesn't, you know. I hope someone's here from Telstra, or something that makes sense, you know. But there's reasons why we don't, for argument's sake, want to get, and it's everybody's personal choice what they do. But we find that Red Bull mixed with alcohol creates a pretty potent result that we don't always like to see and have to deal with on a security level. And I'd be a hypocrite, therefore, to take them as a sponsor or to have them be a sponsor, even on a tent level. We don't do that. We don't. We've done things for years, like we stopped using the Happy High Herbs companies years ago because they kept finding a different way of basically making a facsimile of Molly or Eckies and stuff like that. And it's what you get, it's the reactions you get in human beings when they mix different drugs and what we deal with on a medical level or a security level that made me go like, this is not good. This is not good for human beings, you know? Like, I'm not trying to dictate what people should or shouldn't do, but I'm not going to be part of supplying something that, although it may be legal, does create real issues. And if I can just say something quickly, since there's no questions, you know, I take it very seriously. I mean, I was only just reading the coroner's report in the last couple of weeks of the young lady who died at Big Day Out in Perth a few years back, and what caused that, and going, you know, like she'd taken one ecstasy tablet when she saw the police doing a sniffer dog check, and she took two more, three ecstasy tablets, killed her. You know, I just want to say that strongly. I mean, the police are doing a job, and while things are illegal, we're going to have to deal with the reality of the fact that they're going to be there at festivals. Now, for people to be throwing drugs into you that you don't know the potency of, particularly at times when weather is 30 degrees or more, because these drugs do create real temperature changes in the body, and then to have St John's be the people who, if you are found to be in a certain condition, I'll go quick, are going to be the ones who are the final people to check you, who really don't have the training to know what a drug overdose may be. That's how the girl died. I mean, I'm not blaming St John's, I never would, but she took 3 ecstasies and died. I mean, a lot of people do that sort of stuff.
I had a related question, which is, there's different schools of thought about
think about the potency of it. You don't know what you're taking.
There are different schools of thought about sniffer dogs, and that if they're present, sometimes people might, you know, we're not condoning drug use at all in any way, but sometimes inexperienced people might take everything that they had, whereas if the sniffer dogs aren't there, do you have they won't do that? Do you have a view on sniffer dogs at your festival?
Well, while certain things, but I think the last 3 presidents of the US said that they smoked marijuana, and even though one said he didn't inhale. So I doubt that most people out there haven't tried it. But whilst it's illegal and the police have a brief, they're doing their job, and I don't have a say in that, and in my opinion, doesn't really matter. I know that one person was found with heroin trying to win a Bluesfest this year, and I just go, well, how could that be? I mean, why would you take a drug that knocks you out to go to a music festival?
And it might just be a good place.
So I mean, the police are doing their job, and I'm not in any way going to say anything negative about that. I think that marijuana should be legal, but while it's illegal, they're doing their job.
Might be a good place to finish just on that too. I mean, we're certainly not condoning any drug use, and the police do a fantastic job keeping the order at festivals, and thank you very much for the officers that have turned up today. But we did talk a little bit too, just on that theme yesterday, and well, let's finish because we've gone over time, but we started late. We were talking yesterday about sex, drugs and rock and roll, and to some degree what bullshit that is really. If you, a lead singer said that to me once, that if you take that away, what are you left with? Why is this mystique, this ethos of sex, drugs and rock and roll so important? Why does it go together? And what are you left with when you take it away?
Well, I mean, for artists, you do a show and you get stimulated by that. And it's a bit like footballers. You know, they do a game and you can't go to sleep for hours afterwards, and whether you've got any stimulus or not. And that's when artists get into trouble. They end up, say, on some club at 3 a.m. in the morning, in a bathroom with someone they just met doing something they shouldn't be doing, and next minute someone takes a picture of them, and it's all over the world. I found that some of the blues guys could be very smart. You know, Buddy Guy always says to his band, "Go back to the hotel." It's that simple. And if you want to stay up and have a few drinks, well, you want to invite someone back there, fine, but you're not out in areas where there's a whole situation nowadays which you are certainly up for being photographed or whatever. Not that it's right. I've not lived the cleanest life in the sex, drugs and rock and rolls area. Sure, we're all tempted, and I'm not trying to pass judgment, but I do find as I get a bit older, I love the fact that I don't even hardly drink anymore, and I wake up every morning ready to go, rather than dealing with a 2-day hangover or a 2-day getting over something, and 2 days later you're fighting with your life partner because of your lifestyle. Is that a good thing to do? Just for short-term gain, you know? I don't get it.
Well, look, we've gone...
But I don't want to judge it.
We have gone way over. I'd like everybody to thank Peter Noble for turning up, and Bluesfest for putting... BIGSOUND, I'm sorry, for putting on such a fantastic event.
Hey, Peter, thank you. Hey, thanks for putting up with me.
Thanks, everybody.